Welcome to 3 pages a day. It's early morning. This is when I wake up and get going with my writing. I do it when everybody else is asleep in bed, and I try to get the recording done before everybody's up, but often that doesn't work out as I hoped. But I'm starting here. Here's my blank pages. Here's my 3 from yesterday, well, 2 of them from yesterday that I read out, and I'm going to crack on here now and get my 3 pages done, and yeah, we'll see where it goes. Right, so yeah, I'm back. Got myself a cup of tea. I'm going to read this out to you now. So here goes. So I just shot a quick introductory video to my morning pages, which is a new thing for me. What this demonstrates is that although 3 pages a day is a simple format, it is only ostensibly so. What I mean by this is that there is a gap between the birth of an idea and its execution. And this is a conundrum that goes to the heart of writing. What I mean by that is that ideas come to us perfectly formed as shining new objects in our minds to which we suddenly devote our attention. As with the newborn baby, we are protective of it. We want to look at it, see that all of the pieces are in the right place, that it has 10 toes, 8 fingers, 2 thumbs, and all the rest of it. And then, when we have gone through our initial examination and spent some time with it, we pass it around and try to work out what other people think of that which we have produced. And this is where my first foothold for analogous comparison breaks and makes me wish I hadn't started with it. Because I'm at the end of my first page now, and I can see as my mind argues with itself that it doesn't stand up to scrutiny. But I've said I'll read my 3 pages, warts and all, so that's what I'm going to do. So what I'm trying to say, and I'll just get to the point now, throw the baby out with the bathwater, if you will, and say that there is not a gap, I see that now, but a chasm between an idea and the reality of it. And you cannot compare a baby to a format, which is what I was trying to do and expected to get away with it, and I haven't. What I mean is ideas are blindingly bright, but the bulb is cheap and breaks pretty quickly. For an idea to work, you have to keep unscrewing the old one and replacing it with the new one. After a while, you will get tired of broken bulbs and upgrade the bulb to something more reliable. Crap, another weak analogy, one that lacks weight and credibility, because these days bulbs last the best part of forever. Not like they did when I was a kid and the filaments used to burn out and you'd be replacing them all of the time. You know, it's funny. If I hadn't set myself this daily task, if I didn't need to let every word and page stand in all of its naked ugliness, I would have torn out these 2 pages twice and started over. But I made a promise to embarrass myself over and over, and in so doing, discover if I would become a better writer over time. I guess what I've been trying to say in a roundabout waffly way is that most ideas, no matter how good you think they are, break on first use or require continuous iterations to be usable. My idea for 3 pages a day came to me in a flash, and I thought, brilliant. That's what I'm going to make my YouTube channel about. And the moment I began to do it, everything seemed to fall apart. I learnt that it was not an original idea. I discovered that I hated seeing myself on camera even more than I thought I did. But worst of all, the self-made myth that I have built up around myself, that I'm good at anything, even writing, turned out to be a fortification made of sand. It is the idea, that momentary flash of perceived brilliance, that massages your ego. And it is the application of that idea, the execution of it, that shines a light on every hairline crack that threatens to destroy it. So what do? Do you start over? You can't do that with a baby. You're committed from birth, for better or worse. And as for the light bulb, Edison, its creator, said, I did not fail 100 times. I found 99 ways that didn't work. So, wow, that was almost as hard reading it back as writing it in the first place. So lots of lessons learnt there. First of all, I think using analogy and metaphor is a very dangerous thing to do if you don't have a very clear idea of how the metaphor connects with every element of what you're kind of comparing it to. Or, it's a metaphor is you're using something in the place of something else to illustrate an idea and to make it to increase the level of clarity. But what often happens with metaphors, has happened here with what I've written, is it really muddies the water. And I knew it was muddying the water. So I also did another terrible thing, which is that I started to self-reflect on the page, and then I switched ideas on the page so that the whole thing just sounds like a guy with, acute ADHD you know, who can't follow the thread of one thought through from beginning to end. So, I mean, in all honesty, if this was like a first draft for an essay or an article or something like that, I would probably end up binning about 75% of that, and just, you know, the other, I think the other thing is, if you are going to start with a metaphor, just even though it's not working, if you're going to keep writing about it and you've got to get something off, just stick with it and don't, and try and make it work. Sometimes you have to like force a square peg in a round hole, for want of a better cliche. And if you don't have time, you just have to make it work. So I think initially, and I think this is what happens a lot as well, is I think that I started out, and this is actually reflective of what I mean, what I'm trying to say about, you have an idea and then there's a chasm between the idea as you have it, that flash that goes off in your head, and the execution of it, which kind of destroys it. And a lot of writers say that actually, I think it was Iris Murdoch, she said something like, a novel is the destruction of a perfect idea. So, but that didn't stop her writing, 400,000 page, 400,000 word novels. She just stuck with it. And I think that, any novelist will tell you, that they're proud, that their work's been published, and, that they've been successful in the eyes of kind of society, or, in the eyes of their fans or followers. But in actual fact, if they were to read back what they'd written, they would be hypercritical of it. And I think that this is probably the biggest problem with writing, or as a writer, is you will be your own worst critic. And, it's just par for the course, really. God, I'm full of these wonderful cliches today. There's another thing as well, cliches, we use them because they're shortcuts to what we want to say. But what I would say is, when you're writing, these are the things, like if I said par for the course in an article that I was writing, I would delete that immediately. Anything that you got to have your radar up when you're doing an edit. This is why editing is so important. When you're doing an edit, you have to get rid of anything that stinks, and especially cliches that, they stink because everybody knows them. They're quotidian, they're humdrum, and, people just, throw them around. And they're weak. They there's no imagination behind them. Somebody said it once upon a time, and it was an original idea, probably, and an original thought that caught on. So, but now it's just, it's dull, so you want to avoid any sort of cliches. And this is another clash of kind of ideas here, is that, I've said ideas come to us perfectly formed as shiny new objects. And in a way that sort of breaks down immediately when I start talking about a baby, because, a baby is a shiny new object in a sense, but not in the sense that we think of shiny new objects. So, I mean, I could go line by line through this and just tear it apart and tear it down. And, but, the lessons are in the first drafts. You read it. What you don't want to do is keep writing and reading while you're writing and hating it and throwing it away, because you never get anything done. This has actually got some material in it that I could potentially use, and reconfigure. But if I've thrown it in the bin already, I don't have anything to work with. So at least you've got some raw material. When you've written something down, you've got some raw material. If you write 3 pages a day for a year, you've got 365,000 words, yeah, because say it's about thousand words every time you do 3 pages, which is a huge amount of content. That's a big chunky novel. And then if you went through that and you decided you wanted to sort of turn it into some kind of story or anything really, or you could take elements and then create something from those elements, because you've got that raw material, you've got the rock, which the gold is inside. You can extract that gold from the rock. If you don't have the rock with the gold in it, you can't extract anything. Treat your 3 pages a day as the rock within which is buried the good stuff, you know the diamonds, the precious metals, that kind of thing. And if you do have 365,000 words, even if you cut 75% of it, you'd still have 100,000 words, which is like a good sized novel. If you just binned 3/4 of it, you'd still have something substantial there, which is incredible when you think about it. Okay, well, that's it for today. And yeah, that was pretty painful for me. So, I'm doing this building in public, sharing my shit with you. And yeah, I hope it helps.